Before handing this over to Ida, I'd like to just briefly go over the agenda and just talk about what we're going to go over today. First, we'll do some introductions. Ida will lead that portion. Next, we'll have code and document updates from Eric Drever. There'll be a new back check procedures. We'll discuss that. DSA Inspector Program, Diane, provide an overview of that. And then we'll have legislative updates. We'll review cost estimating template tests, and then regional office updates, and then finally some PSCC member input, followed by some closing remarks. Again, welcome everyone. It's an honor. And with that, I'll end it to Ida.
Good morning. I just got a message that my video is not very clear, so I'll troubleshoot that in a minute when I am not speaking. Welcome to all of you. Thanks for joining us and taking time out of your day. Today we're hoping to inform and, as our charter indicates, get some feedback on some initiatives that we're just checking in on as we progress into the next year, 2024. I know we haven't met in a year. We have had a lot happening this past year that we'll report on. Some of you may be aware of a lot of the items that we're reporting on. Others, it will be new information. Regardless, we do want to connect regularly with you and hopefully aim to do it at least twice next year, if possible. We do have a vacancy on the PSCC, and we have from a community college member, our extra community college member, and we do have interest on that. So we will be engaging with those who have indicated interest to make a selection. So hopefully they'll be joining us next year as well. Other than that, I will introduce new staff. We have had some changes at DSA this year. There's a lot of people on here, so if I'm introducing and I don't see, I'm going to ask. I don't know if my teams will switch with the pictures. But earlier this year, Chris Morton was made Oakland Regional Office Manager. Chris, do you want to take a few minutes to say hello?
Hi, everyone. I apologize. I'm trying to navigate camera issues as well. Teams wasn't cooperating this morning, so I'm on my phone here. But I'm the new regional manager in the Oakland office. I took over in August. I've been with DSA since 2016, so 7 years now. I'm a structural engineer. I've worked with several of the names here throughout my time, so I'm looking forward to working with you in my new role as the regional manager.
Thank you, Chris. Dessa will be retiring at the end of next week, or her last day in the office will be the end of this week, actually, the end of this week. And then she's taking some time off before her official retirement at the end of December. So we thank Dessa for her time at DSA. She's been with us for 20 years. I think about 9 of those years serving as regional manager. So we thank her for her time. And welcome, Chris, to the team. Many of you have heard also that Craig Rush will be retiring in March. We are advertising for his replacement right now, and we'll be making a selection after interviews, hopefully by mid-December, end of December, so that we can have about 3 months of transition between Craig leaving us and the regional manager, so that Craig can show the new regional manager the ropes for the next 3 months, early 3 months in 2024. And of course, obviously, I'm going to create a disc to Craig and maybe teach that new person all his bad habits, which we will try to have an impact on in changing. No, Craig's been obviously a valuable employee, and I tease him all the time. Other than that, let's see, who else do we have new to DSA? In fact, I will likely just popcorn around to DSA staff so that they can introduce themselves. Of course, I will begin with Andrew, who already introduced himself as our Executive Director for the Public School Construction Collaborative. So Andrew, why don't you popcorn to the next DSA employee or staff person?
Great. I'd like to introduce Eric Drever. I've already introduced myself. Again, I'm introduced some others. Eric.
Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see you at the PSCC today. This is my second PSCC meeting, I believe. So if you were not in attendance at last year's, then this is, and you might be meeting me for the first time. I am the principal architect over architectural codes and policies. So that's fire, life safety, access, CASP, sustainability, and a couple other more minor programs. But I will pop over to Michelle Davis, who is new to DSA.
Good morning, everybody. I think maybe I attended last year's meeting as well. Not sure if it was this one, but hi. I see a few familiar faces in the group. I'm the supervising architect for Access. So, and I will go over to George and let George introduce himself.
Morning, everybody. George Barnes. I'm the Principal Fire Life Safety Officer for DSA. Thank you. Please feel free to go next.
Maybe
Hello.
Diane?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Diane Gould, Principal Structural Engineer with the Structural Codes and Standards Unit at DSA headquarters. Good morning.
All right.
Should I
Go ahead.
put it? Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Or are you going to pass it to Harlan? I'll pass
Yeah,
the mic to
Harlan.
Harlan.
Yeah, hi, good morning. I'm Harlan Raymont. I'm the regional manager in the Sacramento office. I've been with DSA for about 11 years in this position, almost 3 years. So good morning and welcome.
So we've already introduced Chris, so I'm going to intercede here and introduce David Brown, who's stepping in for Doug today, who is on vacation. David?
Hi, everyone. I'm David Brown. I'm the Fire and Life Safety Supervisor in the DSA Los Angeles Regional Office. I've been with DSA for, I don't know, a little over 5 years, since the beginning of 2018. And as Ida mentioned, I'm covering for Doug, who's on vacation this week, and good to be here. Thank you.
Aaron Beebe is stepping in for Craig Rush today, who is also out. Aaron?
Hi, my name is Aaron Beebe. I'm a supervising structural engineer here in the San Diego regional office. Been with with DSA for about 7 years. Took over for Eric Wu 1 year ago, supervisor here in San Diego. So thank you.
Okay, so then moving on down the list with DSA, George Barnes. Did we already introduce you? Sorry if I'm being repetitive. I'm trying to troubleshoot my camera as well as managing this. George?
Yeah,
George
I already
already
have,
went.
and your
You
camera's
went.
better.
Okay, sorry about
And
that.
your
Camera is
And your camera looks better.
Thank you. Thank you. All
We do have
righty.
Ryan Turner.
Yes, Ryan Turner.
Yeah.
Good morning. I'm Ryan Turner, Structural Supervisor in the Codes and Standards Unit with headquarters. I've been in that role for about 2 years and with DSA for about 8 years.
Okay, I'm going down the list here real quick. Sean?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Sean Pastrana. I've been with DSA for about 6 years now, and I work for the communication and policy team. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that rounds out the DSA team. So I will have, maybe it's probably easier just to call each of you since some of you aren't on screen, and I'll just go from my list. Julie, and if you could state your role that you represent on the PSCC real quick. Thank you.
Hi, Julie Arthur. I'm Executive Director of Facilities at Palm Springs Unified School District, and I was also a past CASH chair. And so on the advisory, I think I represent that area as a past chair. And as Eric knows, I'm highly interested in anything to do with solar, batteries, or EV chargers.
Thank you, Julie. I was in Palm Springs this weekend and saw a lot of your beautiful campuses as I was driving around. So I thought of you.
Oh, so you probably saw all of our solar canopies, right?
Exactly.
Good.
All right.
And it was gorgeous weather here.
It was stunning.
perfect.
It was stunning. Yeah.
Yeah.
Buddy.
Hi, good morning. Buddy Gussel with DLR Group, an architect, and serve as the architect representative as well. It's interesting you mentioned Craig, because I've worked with DSA for over 22, 23 years now. My very first project, Craig was a plan checker on my project, and he was tough. But so it'll be sad to see him move on to retirement, but well deserved for him.
Absolutely. Thank you, buddy. And thank you for making this meeting today. I know we had some issues in communications and trying to reach you, so I appreciate you making the time on short notice. So
No
thank you.
worries. Thank you.
Courtney Rosso.
Good morning. Yeah, I'm filling in for Devin Conway, but he's my reporting supervisor. So he's a principal at Verde Design. I'm a senior project manager with Verde Design. We are the civil engineer representative.
Thank you, Courtney. Emily, Julia, your entire name is not showing up on my screen. So there it is, Guglielmo.
Hi guys, Emily Guglielmo. I'm a structural engineer and current president of SEOC, the Structural Engineers Association of California. And we are in a little bit of a moment of trying to help Raphael Sabelli and Joyce Fest have served, and looking for some replacements to recommend to potentially be part of this group. And this calendar came a little faster than we were ready for. So I'm here to listen in on behalf of Raphael at the moment and help work on that transition for potentially supplying some new names.
Emily, thank you for attending. Eric Swenson.
Eric Swenson, geotechnical engineer, engineering geologist. I'm also a state director for the California Geotechnical Engineers Association. So I serve as a geotechnical engineering representative on this committee.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate it. Fred Diamond.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Fred Diamond, Director of Facilities at Citrus College. I'm the CCFC chair representing the community colleges.
Thank you, Fred. And Jay, I forgot you when I introduced DSA staff. So Jay, why don't you step in a minute and introduce yourself?
Oh, it's okay. Hi, hi everyone. I'm Jim Montage. I've been with DSA for about a year and a half now. I work on the communications team with Sean and Andrew, and yeah.
Thanks, Jay. Jeff Becker.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Jeff Becker. I'm the Executive Director of Facilities and Operations for the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools, also the immediate past chair of the Coalition for Adequate School Housing. So Julie representing the school district voice. Great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Laura Noss.
Hi, Laura Noss, principal at Lionakis, past Cash Architects Committee chair, and I think I'm representing Architects SAC region.
Thank you, Laura. Phil Armstrong.
Good morning, everybody. Good to see you again. Phil Armstrong. I'm Senior Landscape Architect with the Lightfoot Planning Group in Carlsbad. Represent on the Landscape Architect chair. Also, State Director of CC ASLA, the legislative and lobby arm of landscape architects in the state. Good to see you.
Thank you, Phil. David Sakota, sorry. Go ahead, David.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm David Sakota. I'm a senior consultant with Jensen Hughes. I'm an alarm specialist representing the fire life safety for the PSCC.
Thank you, David. Chase.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Chase White, Senior Engineering Geologist and Geotechnical Engineer with the Essential Facilities Review Program at the California Geological Survey, and so I'm CGS's representative for today.
Thank you, Chase. And Clint Williams.
Good morning, everyone. I am Clint Williams. I am the business manager for Turner Construction's Central California office. I serve the role on the PSCC as the general contractor's representative.
Thank you, Clint. And I know that we go through introductions a lot. Oftentimes we have people step in, and we are quite a diverse group and have many members. And so it's important to take the time to introduce ourselves, mostly because we do have an agenda item item 10, which is a PSCC member input. And by everyone introducing themselves, if you have a question for the geological survey, regarding a geological survey, regarding fire life safety, that's an opportunity for you to also interface with each other in this forum and address any concerns if you want in this group, and have them provide input as well. All right. We have introduced everyone. Now we're going to, we have membership updates from Andrew. Andrew, I sent you an email regarding some interest that I received at the Community College Facility Coalition last week. I will say that we do have a community college vacancy, as I indicated, and we do have 3 people who are interested, but if anyone else wants to advance a name, we can contact them. And then they will each submit an application, and we will make our selection then for our next PSCC meeting. Andrew, did you want to add anything else with that?
Yes, per the charter, PSCC is supposed to have a chairperson elected. We've decided not to do that at this time, and we will update the charter to reflect that.
I think with regard to the chairperson, it was supposed to be that person who interfaces with the rest of the PSCC in scheduling. We have doodle polls. We'd appreciate it if you have a concern that you reach out directly to us. If there is ever a need where we need to have somebody step in and represent and gather an opinion from all of you independent of this forum, we will. Hopefully none of you take objection to that. I know that you had, I think, Phil, you were the chair, and I hope we still recognize you as the chair at this time until there's a replacement, but we're assuming that there's not a need. I do believe it was Phil, correct? Yes, okay, unless you take exception to that, Phil.
No,
okay.
not at all. Please, let's move on.
All right, great. Andrew, I'm going to defer meeting management to you now that I've made the introductions, because the rest of the staff will be providing input. So I do see that we have a hand up, and if you want to take over meeting management, that would be great. Thank you.
Sure. Joyce, you have a question?
I was just introducing myself. Emily is here for SEOC as well, but originally I had been asked to serve on this committee by SEOC, and with a particular eye on the continuing education aspects and opportunities to collaborate. Thank you.
Joyce, thanks so much, and I apologize for omitting you on the list. Sometimes when the list gets a little long and I've already introduced DSA staff, I inadvertently omit someone, so I apologize. This will be an opportunity for anyone else I missed to step up and introduce themselves. All right, Andrew, go ahead.
Great. So next on the meeting agenda is code and document updates with Eric Drever.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Andrew. I'm working off of a small screen here, but I'm going to share. I've got about 6 slides or so, 5 or 6 slides that I'll bounce through. But if you'll forgive my clumsiness while I switch between softwares as I do this.
As Eric's doing that, I will let you know that Eric is presenting to the ICC on their development of the International Green Construction Code, which is the counterpart to our Cal Green, talking about our new carbon regs that he will be introducing in a minute, and trying to spread the word nationwide. He was asked to speak on that. We can advance the United States in the same measures that California is doing. So we appreciate Eric attending today while he's in DC and wanting to actually go out and see the sites as well as do his work.
Work first, and then I'll fit in sites as I can. It's a quick turn trip. I won't get too much opportunity, but I'll do what I can. But for the moment, we're at this meeting. Code updates. We've been in the 2022 triennial for the past 11 months or so, so I presume that most are aware of the code updates that were part of that triennial update. But a quick summary in terms of accessibility, there were some clarifying definitions of access aisle, some clarifying requirements for maintenance of accessible features, separated. One of the larger ones, which really wasn't too terribly significant, was separating entrances and means of egress. We reported on these last year, so I don't want to go too deep into any of the code updates, this or the intervening, but I'll go into a little bit more detail on the intervening. And then the last one in 2022 triennial was clarifying the requirements for housing at a place of education. We are in an interesting place in regulatory development. We are both on the end of the cycle for 2022 intervening code adoption, which is pretty much in the middle of the publication period. We're reviewing proofs of the proposals that were adopted earlier in the year and late last year. But we're simultaneously in the pre-cycle activities for the 2024 triennial code adoption cycle. I won't have any updates on that as of yet on the 24 triennial, but I will go over what is yet to be published in the intervening cycle, but those are, of course, adopted. In chapter 11B, World of Accessibility, it was actually a pretty significant cycle for us. There's a number of, I want to say, Michelle, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there were 18 total proposals in the intervening. So a very active supplement, both in terms of number and subject matter. There were a number of more administrative type proposals that were adopted. For instance, some slope to ratio corrections that still seem to be hanging around in the code, and rescindment or a rescinding of the adoption of the site and practicality in 11A with references to chapter 11B. Realize that site and practicality exists. It's just for DSA, it exists in chapter 11B. So you, of course, would refer to that section if you're doing public housing. There was an item on safe dispersal areas, which was not large, but certainly a big improvement. Received a lot of good feedback on that, which currently safe dispersal areas had no specific scope within the safe dispersal area for accessible spaces. It, of course, needed to be on a route, accessible route, and connect the public way. But these proposals added 2% wheelchair spaces within the safe dispersal area. So those, of course, need to comply with Division 3 for slope and slip resistance. And we also clarified some EV signage. The biggest one was probably all gender multi-user related changes, which included scoping, technical regs, and some pretty significant additions for urinal compartments, which is an element that did not exist inside chapter 11B, and frankly does not exist within the ADA either, specifically. And then there was some related signage to all gender multi-user restrooms. Again, we presented most of these last year, so I won't go into deep detail, but if you have questions about them, I'd be happy to expand on that and answer questions. There was some clarification on ground to floor units, ground floor units, elevators, multi-story units, and scoping for the adaptable units in public housing. That was primarily clarification. There was really no change there. And then lastly, some changes to the adult changing facilities and alterations. And this really was specifically to align with the requirements in statute in terms of timelines. So again, that was a fairly active accessibility cycle for supplements. Why don't I pause there to see if there are any questions before I go into the part 11. Wow, no questions. Okay, then I'll go on. No need to belabor it. So part 5, of course, is the plumbing code, and we early co-adopted with Building Standards Commission the ability to include all gender multi-user facilities. As you probably know, Part 5 currently prohibits and requires separation of sexes. That in the International Plumbing Code, I believe, has already been adopted, and the Uniform Plumbing Code, when we began this process, was not yet adopted, but it has since been adopted in the 2024 Uniform Plumbing Code. Again, we early adopted. We expect to have some language in the upcoming triennial code cycle to more precisely align with the Uniform Plumbing Code model code language, but in essence, it provides an exception to separation of sexes. And there are some requirements in terms of privacy that are included in that. For Part 11, this year we broke out specific school EV charging. That was a significant shift. There are still shared definitions that we share with Building Standards Commission for non-res as well as housing. That was a long process, involved a really active group for EV charging, which Building Standards Commission ran. We certainly were an active party in that. However, ultimately, through our research and through some outreach, which some of you may have participated in, DSA determined that it was because of the specific use case on campuses with a need to focus on low-level charging, it was appropriate to break schools out and campuses out from the typical non-res, which was previously co-adopted by DSA and BSC. So you'll see those new sections in Chapter 5 as well as in scoping. There are some alterations included with that. However, they focus primarily on alterations that affect that parking facility and or that might affect the power going to that parking facility. It's not just a general blanket in terms of alterations triggering the addition of EV charging, but it also focuses on putting chargers into current capable spaces. EV capable continues to be the primary requirement. However, a percentage of EV capables as of 2022 are required to have chargers. And one of the shifts in the supplement is to add some alterations that require the upgrade of EV capable to include EV chargers, making them EV charging spaces. Again, I can answer questions about these requirements once we get to the end. Another large code package that we advanced was, as Ida mentioned, the embodied carbon reduction. Another very active group that we took part in with BSC, HCD, as well as others like CARB and the Energy Commission. This is actually a first in the nation code package. And it's one of the reasons I'm here in DC speaking about it, because there is no other state or country for that matter requiring carbon reduction as part of their building code. What it essentially does is provides 3 paths to compliance. The first path is building reuse. So if you're altering a building and are preserving 45% of the square footage of the primary structural elements or skin, then you can calculate that and comply with the requirements in that way. There's also 2 other ways, a prescriptive and a performance method. The prescriptive essentially takes the Buy Clean California Act carbon limits on specific materials, multiplies that by 175%, and sets those limits as the maximum limits for carbon on those prescriptive materials. One difference in the list of materials is that in these regulations, it was decided to add concrete. And so concrete has been added, and we made significant efforts to ensure that it was equitable in terms of the requirements. I worked hard with the concrete industry to make sure that it was. There is an exception for concrete because it provides a unique challenge in that the way that the materials are obtained is very regional, and the carbon content of the materials, the base materials that go into concrete, being cement, sand, aggregate, are varied, and they also mix it differently. Some are mixed in the plant, some are mixed in the truck. And so it creates an interesting challenge. The exception for concrete is that they are able to use an average and a weighted average to calculate the carbon content of all materials that go into the concrete. So that's a little bit different from the Buy Clean California Act. And then the last is the whole building life cycle assessment, which of course there is free software. If any of you have done LEED, you're very familiar with the whole building life cycle assessments and are used to doing those. So you can show a 10% improvement of carbon for all materials going into that building when compared against a similar building, similar complexity, size, location, etc. So those are the three paths for the embodied carbon reduction. And then lastly, we added CO2 monitors in alterations to classrooms. Again, those are existing requirements for new classrooms. The supplement will include alterations to buildings, including classrooms. So as you see, that was a pretty active supplement. But is there any questions?
Hi, I have a question. This is Buddy
Yeah.
Gessel.
Hi,
On
buddy.
the embodied carbon requirements that are coming up that you just spoke to, how will DSA be reviewing those, and or who will be responsible to verify that those requirements are being met?
We do not have a published final policy on how that will be enforced. However, it is envisioned to be much like other parts of CalGreen, a self-certification of the project team, the design team.
Okay, thanks.
Eric, can you clarify for the group what the proposed effective date of this would be?
Yeah, thanks, David. Yeah, so July 1 is when of 2024 is when the supplement will take effect and be effective. It should be published by January 1. Yes, Phil.
Hi. Hey, just to segue on Buddy's question to you, I've used projects non-DSA, but CNG's Pathfinder app, which is a great embodied carbon application. Similar calculators are in LEED. Is DSA going to, is that an easy way, a path of least resistance to prove prescriptive compliance to that?
You mentioned prescriptive, but also mentioned software, which is suggestive of a whole building life cycle.
I guess that would be, maybe it would be whole building life cycle. Pardon me.
Okay, perfect. It probably will be a project-dependent decision, depending on the types of materials, whether or not you're going after LEED already. I really think it's going to be a case-by-case project decision. I'm not convinced that one is simpler than the other when considered against different projects. So I don't know that there's going to be a path of least resistance to approvals. But in either case, I think most of the software out there do provide an easy compliance summary, which can be indicated and submitted. Again, our final policy hasn't been adopted or published yet, but I look forward to getting that out before the supplement.
Thank you.
I will say that CalGreen also we adopted in CalGreen reporting templates, which rely heavily on design professional attestations and signatures. There is an option, obviously, these regulations are statewide, so they're not only specific to schools. We only enforce the ones specific to schools, or we only enforce the CalGreen regs specific to schools, but if many of you do projects that are not schools. And Eric, can you stop sharing your screen, please?
Sure. Oh, I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
I've given it to you in triplicate or something.
Yeah, thanks.
The video echo.
If you're doing also projects locally, they have the same requirements for non-school buildings, non-res buildings. And what's important to understand that in addition to those templates that we provide for attestations and documentation, the local jurisdiction may also require a third-party review. We don't have that requirement that we're advancing just yet. That still needs to be discussed further in our policy documents, but that is provided for in CalGreen is a third-party review. Obviously, the greenest buildings, the ones already built, and the easiest way to comply is existing building reuse. So let's go for that. But other than that, the whole building life cycle analysis, we do need to rely on free software because as regulatory requirements, it's very difficult to require paid software, especially when there's many options out there. You're welcome to use paid software if it's easier for you to use, but in the regulations, we have listed free software that you can use. And so those are the varying paths that are still being provided, and we're working with building officials and our industry partners in establishing the easiest method. Really, our goal with these regs is to become familiar with whole building life cycle analysis, become familiar with products and the embodied carbon of products, understand their reporting mechanisms, and have that be a conscious decision in projects. So we have set the threshold pretty high so that we can move forward in that education realm. And we are working with our partners to bring more education to you, hopefully on DSA Academy really soon. One thing I do want to provide notice of is that, especially when it comes to concrete and low carbon concrete, to ensure that what you specify in your whole building life cycle analysis and producing EPDs is also reflected in your specs. We will do an analysis if you're, even for any project now, if you're advancing low carbon measures, including concrete, we want to make sure that your documentation is accurate because it will, if you're substituting low carbon and you've specified just regular Portland cement or something like that, that CCD will need to happen. So be very careful in your project assembly of all your documents, carry it through so that there isn't difficulty later on in construction and having to change something and submitting a change if we didn't catch it. I don't know if you wanted to add any more to that, Diane, since I know that we've been having this discussion as of late.
I'm sorry, I have to admit I was distracted by
That's
something
okay.
else I was reading. What was the question?
I was just addressing being thorough in addressing low carbon materials, being thorough into their specifications, because if there's any change that happens later on, that a CCD will be necessary, especially when it comes to structurally related items.
Yeah, and I think if there's any particular question on how to do it, really it comes down to the traditional Portland cement is the ASTM C150. So if the desire is to include the option to do the Portland limestone cement, that's a different ASTM spec. So we just need to make sure if that is an option the designer wishes to pursue, that they include either that that dual option of the ASTMs in their specs. But beyond that, really the process for approving and submittal and approval of the mixed designs, it is, doesn't matter what cement you have in the mix, it's still, you got to submit your mixed designs, break histories, that sort of data. So it really comes down to, because that Portland limestone cement is a different ASTM, it's critical to get that in the design documents in the first place, if that's desired by the professional. Other than that, CCD after the fact is still relatively straightforward, but again, more paperwork, more time. Looks like we have a couple hands up. Laura?
I just wanted to confirm there's no square footage threshold for this.
Actually, thank you for bringing that up.
Okay.
Yes, there is. For DSA, this affects buildings 50,000 square buildings or groupings of new buildings 50,000 square feet or larger.
Okay,
For
that's what I thought, but
non-res,
I was getting
yeah.
nervous. Okay.
Thanks for asking the question.
Yeah.
For non-res, it's a stepped requirement. For other non-res, for any other private architects out there, it starts at 100,000 square feet. And I think in July, I may be getting the date wrong, but in July of 2025, I think they step it to 100,000 square feet. Or excuse me, step it down to 50,000 square feet.
Actually, it's
Oh.
January 1st,
Oh, is it
2025. Yeah.
Okay, so there,
And just to
6 months off.
clarify, if you're doing an addition to an existing building, that aggregate number will also apply, but hopefully your 45% existing building calculation meets your threshold with that addition. When you actually get into the requirements, they're pretty modest. That's intentional to get it into the code. So I will tell you right now, in terms of cost and what we've determined, especially from the suppliers, is that all these products are easily met without increased cost in construction materials. The only thing that might have an additional cost is the design professional fee on doing a whole building life cycle analysis, which is estimated to be less than 1% of their fee. It's really to educate, to get it in the code, and as we advance, to tweak down on the requirements as more products become available, so that we can address holistically the impact of the built environment on carbon and our climate action goals, according to governor's wishes, and obviously just the improvement of the planet. Buddy.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Eric.
Buddy, that's okay, buddy. One moment, I'll get your hand. In terms of the ability for market materials, current market materials to meet these regulations, that they're readily available. We've heard zero concern from steel, glass, insulation, concrete industries that they are unable to meet it. And actually, with steel, we've actually heard the contrary. They were pleased that the limit was raised because it included one additional plant that apparently could not meet the Buy Clean California limits simply because of its sourcing histories and where they source their materials. They were pleased that the limit was increased, but I will say the comments that we have received is actually pressure to lower those thresholds. So certainly that will be on our radar as time goes on. But in terms of market materials being able to meet the requirements, it really shouldn't be a concern. Buddy.
Yeah, my question adds on to Laura's, the 50,000 square foot threshold. You mentioned grouping of buildings or buildings, so it sounds like is it by a number or by campus or, okay. So say, for example, there were, I don't know, 2 architects working on a really large campus, even like a community college campus. So it'd be one architect might have 30,000 square foot project in their scope, and then the other team might have 30,000. So aggregate, you're over the 50, but it would just be per application number.
Correct.
Okay.
On the other hand, if you're designing a brand new campus, obviously that might kick it in, right? With all the new buildings that are on a campus, you'd likely reach the 50,000 square foot threshold. Obviously, that would be one architect as well, so it's still applicable on that app number.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
Really good questions. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. So we're very excited about this, and hopefully all of you can let us know if these regulations impact your project moving forward. Let us know how, so that we can advance amendments if needed moving forward, and also help inform our processes as well. Okay. David, did you want to introduce yourself? I noticed you just joined us, so I want to make sure that everyone knows you're on the call. David Karina? Yeah. You're mute.
You're muted.
You're still mute, David.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Don't you hate hearing that? Okay, my name's Dave Carina. I'm the project inspector member of the PSCC. And I apologize for my tardiness. I was on a phone call I could not get off of. It was project related. So anyway, things are going well. So thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Thank you, David. So if there are no further questions on Eric's presentation on code updates, we move to item 5, which is the new back check procedure. Aaron, I think that you were going to make this presentation on behalf of Craig, yes?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll defer to you then. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Yes, here to talk about the new back check procedure. If you've done any work with the DSA over the course of the last 6 months or so, you should have hopefully gone through the process at least once or twice, but wanted to talk about a little bit of the background on where we were and how we got to where we're at today with the new back check procedure. In the past, pre-COVID, in the paper years, you would do your plan review in paper, or as we progress over the last 5 years into the full electronic plan review environment, DSA would review the plans, return the corrections to the design team. The design team would review those corrections, and then, of course, schedule an in-person back check with the associated regional office, and then go about addressing those comments with the plan reviewer in the office, in person, and that would go on through as many meetings or through whatever duration was necessary until the approval of plans. As we all know, in March of 2020, we had the whole pandemic and COVID hit, and then DSA, as with many other organizations, went to a fully remote environment. At that time, we decided to use the Microsoft Teams platform to perform our back checks, which was great. We were lucky that we were nimble enough, and in the fully electronic plan review environment had the Microsoft Teams environment to work in. So it created a seamless transition into the remote environment. But throughout that process, the back check procedure became more fractured and inconsistent. Back checks were used in teams, but both parties were not present, or in some cases it was performed in an in-person environment. In some cases, plan reviewers or officers were requiring resubmittals of the plans several days or several weeks in advance. And so this created a lot of confusion with the design teams, rightfully so, as due to the inconsistent nature of the process. And then when they would come in for the Microsoft Teams back checks, in many cases, the back check was incomplete, or there was no incentive to have the whole project complete, and that created frustration between both parties, ended up dragging the process along, and obviously the regional managers got wind of this, and it became apparent that we needed a true procedure moving forward. And so what DSA leadership did is they developed a compromise between the convenience of the remote meetings and then the accountability of the in-person meetings. And this resulted in a 2-phase solution. Phase 1 is an at-desk back check, and then phase 2 is an in-person back check. So the phase 1 at-desk back check is essentially a resubmittal. So you would get the corrections, you reply to those corrections within the Bluebeam environment with full responses to each one of the corrections. You resubmit those construction documents, you schedule a time when you want to submit those documents to the plan reviewer. The plan reviewer takes into account the size and complexity of the job, the completeness of the job, as well as all the other entities, access and fire, and in some cases, green energy. They take those schedules into consideration, as well as your preferences. They schedule a submittal date, and then they schedule a completion date for that phase 1 at-desk review. And that can be anywhere from a few days to a few weeks, depending on the size of the project and the magnitude of the corrections. And what this does is it gives the design team an opportunity to get it right the second time, if you will, with as little pain as possible. This was the preference coming out of the remote environment. It seemed that our clients really enjoyed the convenience of the remote aspect of it and not having to come to the office and so on and so forth. So there's no travel, there's no interaction with the plan reviewer. And the idea here is that you get your submittal in, you return all the corrections, and then this frees up the client to start working on the next school project. And that's just a more efficient use of everybody's time. And then this would also reduce the in-person back check time. And you do have the opportunity to get your project approved in that manner. If there still are outstanding corrections, then we move to what is phase 2, which is the in-person back check. And this is what DSA, the regional managers, this is where we like to hold the design team accountable. So you haven't addressed all the comments as we felt necessary to be a code compliant building. So now you're going to come into the office, albeit for a reduced period, because you already had an opportunity to address the vast majority of the comments. In this case, you would set up an appointment for the regional office, just like you did pre-COVID. And then you would just meet with the plan reviewer, and this would carry on as necessary until the approval of the plans. This was all documented into a internal document, PR 2301, which is the back check procedure for DSA staff to use internally. When we released this in May of 2023 this year, it became apparent very quickly that we needed an outward facing document so that our clients understood this process much easier. And so that document is in the works. I don't know the time frame of that, but we are working on that. In the interim, we did develop a series of standard notes very quickly, which basically is a brief summary to walk you through each one of the various phases and what those phases entail and how it works. That is a standard plan review comment that is included on every cover sheet of every plan review document that goes out the door, or at least should be. And then we've also piggybacked on that additionally. And so at each one of the various phases, we have a series of email templates that our plan reviewers have for use, so that when a client reaches out and makes that first touch to schedule the back check appointment, we have an email template when the schedule is confirmed, and it describes to them the submittal process, how that process is going to go, the schedule for that process, and so on and so forth. So we have that at the various phases, phase 1 and phase 2, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that's the new back check procedure with the phase 1 and phase 2 process. I guess I'll open it up to any questions that anybody might have coming out of that.
So we're looking for feedback if you've had experiences. I can't say that we will address your specific concerns today in understanding exactly what the issue might be project specific. So we would like app numbers, but just a general comments or anything about the process specifically. But Jeff Becker?
Yeah, thank you, Ida, and thank you, Aaron, for the good description of the new backcheck procedure. We put a number of projects through it and appreciate the phase one look where the team at DSA can review the project, get familiar, get their list of questions. Being in Fresno, and I know other districts have the same experience, it's a long trip to come in for an in-person back check. After going through this with a number of projects, I would make a recommendation just from the school district perspective and the teams that we hire of maybe a phase 1A where there is a virtual conversation. I've had a design team where they felt their questions that were remaining were fairly simple questions, but they got a template email back that was, hey, you must come in. And they're going to drive 6 hours for a rather short duration meeting. So maybe an in-between option before the teams have to get together in person. So there's an agreement of, hey, yeah, we do need to work through some issues that might take some face-to-face time versus just some communication via a Teams call or a telephone call to see if the issues could be easily resolved.
Yeah, the procedure does leave the door open for that upon supervisor approval. I agree with you. If I have a little bit of a rule with my staff where if they're just going to come here for less than a half hour or something along that nature, and we're just checking a few boxes here and there, then perhaps you could just go ahead and close out the project remotely, and that's a more efficient use of people's time. So you certainly have that opportunity to have your design team make that request on an as needed basis, and then it's just up to the supervisor and the individual offices managing that staff to make that decision. But agreed, we're not interested in wasting people's time. I think that was the goal here.
Thank you.
Laura, I believe you were next.
Thank you. I think this is great. The clarification publicly, I think, will be very good. Our bigger issue has been multiple versions where plan check keeps happening. When we've addressed everything, we submit it 2 weeks at the request, and then someone new is looking at it. Maybe it was an outside plan reviewer originally, and then it's an inside plan reviewer, and we have a series of different plan check comments that I would consider minor, really minor. So I guess, is there anything in there about ongoing plan review? Because they weren't things we didn't pick up. They've never been things we didn't pick up. They're new comments. I want more detail on this. I want things that honestly we wouldn't, some of them are comments we would never have seen before. Comments on our standard details that have gone through 412 times. I guess, what is there limitations or coaching of the team that limits that version 2, version 3 ongoing plan review?
Yeah, your concern was baked into the procedure. The regional managers were very explicit that the phase 1 back check is not an opportunity to re-plan review the project. That is never the intent, and that should not be happening in the phase 1. Now, in saying that, we should never be re-plan reviewing scope that was in the original submittal. But if there's information that's added or additional details or what have you that occur due to comments that occurred in the original plan review, then certainly those would need to be reviewed and could have the potential for additional comments. So I share your concern. I can speak for myself personally. All I can say to you is please bring that up to your supervisor. The only way we can make those corrections is if we know about it. And so I've had that maybe a half a dozen times with my staff and have made the appropriate corrections as needed. But we are trying to make that effort to not re-plan review the project. That's not the intent, and you guys shouldn't have to endure that.
Great, thank you.
Laura, I will tell you, I know that we still need you raised some app numbers that we've researched and we still need to meet with you, and that will be coming. We've just been moving ships at DSA in the month of October, and it's been a little nutty. So I will look to schedule that hopefully next week if possible.
Great. And if those are past history, we don't have to meet on them. I just think going forward, having some more consistency, because what has happened, it becomes a real scheduling issue. You think you're going back for your final back check and you get put out for another one that has to get resubmitted 2 weeks ahead of time, yada, yada, yada. It's hard to plan around that for our clients.
Sure. And we understand that. We hope that just addressing project specific concerns and looking at a trajectory might help both you and us moving forward. So
Great,
I just want to let you know it's on my agenda, but with all our moving schedules, I've hardly been in the office in the month of October due to conferences and such. So I do want to get that on the schedule. Buddy, you were next.
Sure, thanks. So I think in general, I think the procedure is going well for us. We appreciate the options to expedite and work with especially some of the remote teams. So in general, my question was tied with what Jeff's comments were, if it's a 1A or a 2A process where if we're down to just a few items and it's 30 minutes or an hour's worth of conversation, sometimes it's just easier to get on and talk through something versus going back and forth with 4 or 5 different versions because we're just not understanding what we're typing. And so I think that option to have a Teams for that would be something to consider. We actually just had a small project that went through DSA San Diego, and we got down to this one last item, and they're like, oh, you need to come in. And then the plan checker thought about it, and they're like, you know what, we can just do this on Teams. No worries. So it was nice to see some flexibility in that, and that's something I think you might want to consider as well.
Yeah, and I agree with your point. And that's the intent. And it sounds like you guys went through the right path. You got down to the wire, you had a conversation with your plan reviewer, you guys were pragmatic about it, and you came to a reasonable solution, and that makes sense. So I think that's the intent, and that's how the procedure is written, to give some flexibility for that.
Perfect, thank you.
Courtney, I believe you're next.
Yeah, I think after hearing Laura and Buddy, that was resonating their same expressions of just some flexibility, particularly if comments are being received, like new or fresh comments after your resubmittal, to be able to have an opportunity to resubmit those virtually as opposed to this being a new comment. And then if in that, what if we call it like V3 situation, that is not addressed, it's still as if those comments are still in there like V2. So having the flexibility and separation, I think any kind of, excuse me, the publication that you're describing coming out for us to have as reference will be super helpful. But so I think Buddy and Laura addressed what I was thinking about. I'm not sure if it's the exact spot to mention it. I did have a little bit of a question about the prior reference documents of when we're providing like past A numbers in our packages and how those get formatted, either being uploaded as supplementary, or I've had the experience with some of those being requested to be on the new project plan sheets. So not sure if now is the time to do it or if that's probably for a later agenda item, but I can hold on that if you want.
I don't know if I can answer that directly. I think in general, if something isn't part of the actual scope of the project or what have you, at least here in San Diego, we don't approve for reference documents, if you will, if you're trying to prove some sort of path of travel or something. I don't know for sure. I'd have to take that on a case by case basis, but
yeah.
So yeah.
Understood. And I'm predominantly working with the Oakland office, but it seems just across our office, there's been a little bit of inconsistency as to, let's say, a reference like a restroom building servicing an outdoor facility for a new project, providing those reference documents as an like the former A number, just as a supplementary, versus some reviewers wanting like the specific sheets of those prior A numbers pasted into the new project sheets so that they're more, I understand, like more readily visible. And since they are serving that, but we just have a lot of projects where we're utilizing other accessible facilities for the new project that are already in place. So there's been a little bit of ambiguity that we've experienced with that about like where we are supposed to be putting the details and truly like the floor plans, elevations or whatever for those facilities in our new project packages.
Yeah, I guess I can just only encourage you to reach out to the individuals at or the leadership at the Oakland office to work through some of those intricacies of what's supplementary and what isn't. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and I think, I appreciate the feedback about the scheduling aspect of things. If you have any other feedback about the scheduling and how that's working, what that does to your full project delivery timeframe, I'm sure we would certainly appreciate that feedback. I think we're only 6 months into this, Ida, I believe. I know we're working on some metrics to understand where backcheck was at in years prior, and then where it's at now, and to see how this whole thing is playing out. So we are working on understanding how that scheduling is beneficial to the overall project delivery.
And we encourage you that if issues arise that you feel are inconsistent with our policy, to raise that to the regional manager and just have a discussion, not necessarily to say challenge it, but I think we need to know in the management of this process, that consistency is important, right? And
Yeah.
trying to understand. So I think that part is critical. And I'm sure, Chris, you've heard the comments here. Maybe trying to also discuss that with your supervisors on information on previous projects and addressing that.
Yeah,
as well.
I think to address the specific questions, and you've touched on this before, Ida, specific application numbers where there's some confusion or something that is being asked that hasn't been done previously or is outside of published guidelines, specific application numbers will assist in getting to the bottom of the issue.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah, we received many projects last year, over 4,000. So app numbers are critical when raising concerns and issues, because we can really start to see in the course of a project where the concern arose, and how then we can look at it holistically from the overall process perspective. Yes, please. And application numbers are important. Laura, go ahead.
I don't know if this, again, following Courtney, I don't know if this is the right place to raise it, but I wanted to bring up some comments from our team on a consistent basis. We're seeing intake being raised to a high level, what's expected at intake, and a little bit of inconsistency on where you're given 2-day incomplete notices and where you're rejected completely, because we certainly don't see the reason for full rejection of the intake. And on one project, we'll get 2 days, usually get delivered on Friday at about 4:30, which is another question, and then other projects where we don't get the 2 days. And again, this is a little more office specific, I think, but I wonder how that decision is made on whether you get time versus complete rejection. Often when we call and we push and we say we can get it done in 2 days, we'll get that done, but it just seems there's not a lot of consistency there.
I think, unfortunately, we don't have a statewide intake process that I'm aware of. So it is very office to office. in terms of how stringent they are. I can speak for the San Diego office that we almost, I would say, 95% of the time, unless there's egregious errors in the project, we always offer up 2 days for the design team to pick up their items to correct. And in many cases, if scheduling permitting, depending on the plan reviewer or whoever we had slated for that project, we may make some concessions based on the design team reaching out to us or so on and so forth. But yeah, I think that's just an office to office thing. The one thing that we've seen here in San Diego, and I can't speak for the other offices, is the PV and the battery energy storage stuff. I think took everybody by surprise, and we had, I would say, at least 3 out of 4 of our new projects were missing these items. And so we were trying to be very lenient early in the year and perhaps rejecting them initially and then offering up re-registration with an early submittal, scheduling permitted, understanding the design teams had a little bit of a surprise or heavy lift on that stuff. But in general, that's where we are on San Diego. I'll defer to the other offices in terms of their approach to it.
Eric? You're mute, Eric.
Sorry about that. So decent segue, Aaron, thanks. And I just wanted to highlight the various documents that the DSA has produced. So we have campus solar as an alternate means, which there's, I think that's PR 23, I'm going to get the number wrong, 2304, that's on our website, and it allows or provides some guidance on how, if there is existing solar on a campus and you're producing excess power for that campus, how you can use that excess power to justify the new solar requirements in the energy code. We've also recently, or this past year, published IR N3 and N4, and those also deal with battery and solar as well. So just highlighting N4, I believe, is the battery, and it goes into some detail about fire life safety aspects and structural aspects of large battery systems. So if there are any questions, feel free to direct those my way. We can always add clarity if needed.
Diane?
Thank you. I was going to respond to Laura's comment of receiving notice at 4:30 on Friday that you have 2 days to respond. I think I'm not familiar with all the specific language of all of our notes and templates that go out, but I believe there is language in some of those communications that I think refers to 48 hours actually. So this was something that was discussed recently in a meeting that included all the regional managers, and they all agreed the intent is that it's 2 working days. We're not going to be here on Sunday to make sure you get it in by Sunday at 4. But there's maybe some clarification of the language that might be needed if we touch this again.
Harlan, thank you, Diane. Harlan?
Yeah, I just wanted to tag on to what Diane said. It's 2 business days. It's not over the weekend. You got to have your project into us by 8 o'clock Monday morning. That's not the case whatsoever. And then I wanted to also say that there is some flexibility in that 2 days. If you've got something like some calculations that you're just wrapping up and you need an extra day, like a 3rd day to get those into us, and just call us and let us know. And we're not interested in kicking your project out, but we do need to have a complete project to review.
Yeah, my question was really not the understanding the 2 days. We understood it was 2 working days. It's always just Friday you get frazzled. But is the difference between when you get the 2 days and when you don't seems inconsistent, where it's a full out rejection for rescheduling. Because there seems like very little in both, and I just wanted to understand what the difference was. And it looks like it's at intake architect's discretion.
Chris, do you want to address that since your hand is up?
Yeah, that's what I was going to get into is the 2 days is something that the offices offer to get projects into plan review. We want to get them into plan review. It's not a published item. Each project is not guaranteed a 2-day review of this. So the intake architect does have some discretion in working with this in determining, are the items significant enough that the design team can reasonably provide a complete response to these items in 2 days? Or is it something that is so egregious, was the word that Aaron used, that even if the team says they can get something to us in 2 days, it's likely going to be uncoordinated and thrown together and difficult to efficiently plan review. So that's the best way to break it. And I can see this is an item that we would have further discussion because you're going to say that your team can do it. And there's other things that no, this reasonably can't be done in this time. That's where the discretion of the intake architect is used on this.
I think a little bit that of what's a challenge is we take all projects, obviously, we need to. We're required to, and we don't complain about that, but we do have staff that's being scheduled. Not your specifically, but a school's project coming in and being ready for review does tend to impact others in their schedule. So we'd like to think that we can get started on the review, and for the information you submit 48 hours is not going to derail that. But we do need to make that judgment. And so it's very difficult for us to publish that 48 hours or 2 days requirement, because then it starts to slip further, right? Oh, I have an additional 2 days to get them to them. I'll get that in a minute. It's something that we allow as a grace period, but it's in consideration and in context. We don't really care to publicize that. And we hope that you understand that requirement is a project by project requirement. We do understand that projects are complex and something may be overlooked. And that is then when there's a debate of the 48 hours, if it's possible to bring into the office, but we prefer not to put that into writing. You have 48-hour grace period or 2-day grace period to submit it. And so we ask for that engagement on the realistic ability to make sure that documentation's there and the critical nature of it in the sense of commencing review. But thank you for
I
the
guess we
feedback.
just, I just think intake comments have evolved to be what used to be plan review comments. I guess I'll just leave it there, right? That the intake level is so much higher, and we're outside plan reviewers for you guys, and could argue that there's more plan review comments in intake than you would anticipate, right? That are outside the DSA 3, right? So that's all. And just how we can be consistent about that when you think you've submitted something that's complete. So I guess call the regional manager.
Yeah, it's interesting because sometimes I hope it's more office by office variance than it is within office variance. The regional managers can address inconsistencies that may occur within the office. I will say they can bring to their regional managers meeting and our senior staff meeting inconsistencies to discuss within all offices. So again, application numbers are critical so that we can see where the discrepancies lie. And I hate to be a broken record, but obviously we do want to get down to the nitty-gritty of the details before we amend a process, because it's very difficult to do it on a general. So we appreciate your experiences. This is the forum to address those concerns and obviously provide that follow-up for us so that we can investigate further and then get back in touch with you. Eric, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just maybe a question of Laura, and I realize we're talking anecdotally here, so details aren't known, but do you is it your sense that these intake comments are outside the three big, meaning fire, life safety, access, structural safety? Are they energy, CalGreen related sort of comments? Certainly there's been a
Sometimes
little bit
that,
of an
and we can,
expansion in that area
yeah,
for intake
sometimes
because they
that.
have to verify documentation.
Yeah, sometimes that, but I think more importantly that there is a assessment of whether a structural calc is complete, and the calcs are there, but you wanted a different extra calc on this one thing, right? And it's would normally have been a plan review comment. Our people, if they were the outside plan reviewers, would have accepted it as a plan review comment. And I don't mean to make this a big deal. It just
Sure.
is hard to plan around that consistency again to the schedule. If you're kicked out, right, and you have to make an appointment for 6 weeks later, that's a schedule impact that you weren't expecting because you thought you submitted a complete set of documents.
Okay, thank you.
I think in those cases, it's very important to reach out to the regional manager when it impacts your schedule significantly to have an assessment of it, just a second look. Or the supervisor, I should say first, and then if no avail, the supervisor reach out to the regional manager. Any further comment on back check? I think we've had a good, healthy discussion and we appreciate your feedback, but we do want to take all comments. So are there any further comments? Okay, and Aaron, I know that we discussed having a forward-facing document. I'm assuming hopefully by around the first of the year that will be coming out. Do you have any, did Craig indicate any, I know that he's our chief on this whole process. Did he indicate when that might be coming out? No. Okay.
No, I
No
wasn't given any
promises.
timeline on that.
No promises, but it's on the agenda. We look to putting that out as soon as possible. Thank you. All right, so no further comments. We'll move along in our, obviously, if you have further comments that you want to address, you're welcome to reach out to me, regional manager. We can have those inter-office discussions, at our bi-weekly senior staff meeting, or the principals meet weekly. If it's office specific, again, reach out to your regional manager. All right. The next topic we are discussing is project inspector program, a little bit of overview and feedback before I pass this to Diane. We are trying to clarify and consolidate the requirements in the code for project inspector into one certification section. So what that does is it provides greater accountability on the application, certification, continuing education, recertification, and appeals process, to have that consistently in one section instead of the administrative code, instead of dispersed among the sections. So we're trying to seek greater clarity. We hope that making those improvements will hopefully attract new people to the program because their expectations are clearer. And then, of course, B, just provide that greater clarity to those who are already in the process. And it also assists us in providing for greater accountability in our processes of certification, recertification, application to the program. Just to clarify, DSA is charged with certifying project inspectors. We don't see our role is to recruit them. We do know there's a shortage. We do want to help, but in that end, it is a partnership, right? In the sense of, we want to know where our regulations are an obstacle to getting people into the program. And we also want to know how we can assist if any of you come up with ingenious ways to recruit project inspectors into the program and need DSA assistance. I'm going to turn this over to Diane right now for this discussion, and you can take it over, Diane. Thank you.
Thank you, Ida. You did such a thorough intro. I don't know what more to add other than, yeah, the project inspector program falls under the group that I oversee, as Ida mentioned, we're always receiving feedback regarding difficulty in finding inspectors. We get complaints about project inspector performance, and also, as Ida mentioned, just although we're not responsible for recruiting inspectors, we're certainly interested in hearing about if our existing regulations, policies might be creating unintentional barriers to prevent or delay inspectors from pursuing certification. So really, this is a touch point moment for me to seek feedback from this group just on any aspect of our project inspector program, because we are, as Ida said, we're embarking on some improvements to our regulations, possibly our policies and procedures regarding the program. With this esteemed group, I'm hopeful we can have some great feedback experiences. So I'm open the floor to anyone who has general comment on the program.
Clint, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just curious, in the past, if you say DSA's responsibility is to certify, but not necessarily to recruit, how does one find out, or how does an individual know about the opportunities? What's been the experience in the past? Has it just been word of mouth?
Oh, very good question, Clint. I think that what's important is that, and Diane, or you might want to take a couple minutes to highlight what the qualifications are for the project inspectors and get feedback on where others might see that there's a role for them in that recruitment process. So our project inspectors do have to meet minimum qualifications for experience. Being aware of what those are help us to tap into, for all of you being aware of what that is, helps to tap into perhaps new potential. Obviously, for the community colleges out there, you may have programs that can facilitate this, right? And that's one of the avenues that we're interested in partnering, obviously not championing, because again, we don't see this as a recruitment, but in understanding that if there is a process out there. And Diane, you also might want to highlight the assistant project inspector program to see how many actually avail themselves of this pathway. I think what's important to respond to you, Clint, is if you're perhaps better aware of what those requirements are, where they're located in the administrative code, if we can provide additional clarity as to the whys and the process, I think that will be a bigger step. Right now in the administrative code, the responsibilities of what project inspectors do and their certification process is intermixed in the administrative code. Part of the reason we want to remove the process and put it in its own chapter is to say, look, there's a process of just seeking certification, recertification, continuing education, accountability, and the whole disciplinary and appeals process that's independent of what they actually do out in the field. It's DSA's engagement on just accountability for the project inspector. And then of course they do, which is tied, but is in the regs where it's appropriate, is important. So I think our goal is separating them provides greater ease for us and engagement with our project inspectors, but also perhaps greater clarity on that expectation so that we can recruit. I'm going to ask Diane real quick to highlight what the qualifications are, if it can be easily condensed. Diane, and then of course, as well, the assistant program, to see if maybe those of you out there see a role where you can take on in saying, hey, perhaps even in the classes that you offer, in seeing that this would be a good role for you. We're all about career technical advancement, and I think that if we partner in the project inspector program, it not only benefits the project inspector or the student or the potential candidate, but obviously your future engagement and employment or contracting of them and our future management of the program so that we don't have an aging workforce that then is very difficult to replace. Go ahead, Diane.
Okay, so the question of whether I can go through it quickly. We have all of this that I am scrolling through are the various options, how you can qualify to sit for the exam. So basically,
And this
you
is
have
entry
to,
level, correct? This is as a coming in without being, this is not like advancing in certification. This is, you're just talking about the entry level right now.
there's the different classes. So let's look at a class 3 qualification. Yeah, that's a good. So class 3 is our entry level. We used to have a class 4, which we have not, we're no longer running class 4 exams, but anyone who has a current class 4 certification and continues to recertify, we will do that. So right now, class 3 is the lowest level. You can have 2 years of experience.
I'm sorry, Dan, can you make that bigger on the screen?
Oh, yeah.
Full screen? Thank you.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So for a class 3 inspector, and we also have, I'll back up here to the exception that even if they're lacking years of experience, because it's all about experience, so showing that they
Right.
have experience with construction, right? So if they are short of it on the experience, because part of this, what I'm showing you is our DSA 175, which is the application that gets submitted when you want to sit for the exam. They submit the application and my staff review, they have to submit all their qualifying experience. My staff verifies that they have the appropriate level of experience depending on which option they're choosing here. But even if they fall short in that years of experience, up to a maximum of 1 year, they can go ahead and sit for the exam, but they need to continue and finish out that experience. So they can pass the exam ahead of having the experience up to 1 year. And I think that they have to get that experience within 3 calendar years after they pass the exam. So there is that footnote on top, I will say. And the same thing, if you have a bachelor's degree in architecture, engineering, building inspection, or construction, once again, you may sit for the exam, but you have to get that years of experience before we will grant the certification within 3 years of the exam. So you can have 2 years experience, basically working as an inspector when you have a certification by another organization. You can have a mechanical or electrical engineer registration and 1 year of qualifying experience in observation of the construction of building systems. You can have 2 years of qualifying experience working as the lead superintendent on projects that are consistent with DSA classifications. And then, as I mentioned, that we have that class 4 project inspector series that we've retired, but if you've worked for 2 years as a project inspector, you can sit for the class 3 exam. 1 year, or being certified as a class 4 inspector, and any combination of 1 year of qualifying experience on projects, working as an assistant project inspector, a special inspector, working as the representative in code enforcement inspection when you have that certification by another party, or a journeyman or equivalent. We also have the option to have 6 years of relevant construction experience, including 2 years as a journeyman or equivalent experience level in carpentry, steel, concrete, or masonry trades on projects consistent with DSA project classifications. If you have 2 valid special inspector certifications and 4 years of experience as a special inspector. And that is it for the class 3. So there are many options, many avenues, and most of these I skipped over, but most of these you can substitute up to 6 months of experience if you show that you've completed coursework in architecture, engineering, or building inspection. So
Do you
Okay.
have an idea at all, Diane, as to which one is the pathway that is predominant for our project inspectors when they enter? I know that I'm throwing that to you cold turkey, and so I was just
I
curious.
don't know that. I don't know that. We may have a way of determining that. I will tell you that the spreadsheet that my staff uses to verify the spreadsheet that has lots of columns and lots of rows, I don't believe we do require them to check which one they're using to qualify. So I think we would have a way of determining that because we would still have at least the prior applications. But
Thank
I
you
don't
for
know that offhand. Yeah.
Fred, you have a question?
Yeah, Diane, could you send me that document and I'll make sure that I share that with all of our colleagues? A lot of the
Absolutely.
colleges they're
Yeah.
trying to grow their construction management programs within CTE, and that would fit right in.
It's what we
Great.
want to
Yeah,
hear,
I'd be
Fred.
happy
Thank
to.
you. And
Yeah,
of
I was
course,
We
gonna,
actually are growing ours right now. I'll make sure that I share that with the dean.
yeah, I was gonna
so
piggyback on that also,
go
not
ahead.
only the CTE programs, but at all the colleges and universities, not just engineering and architecture, but a lot of the construction management programs. There's a very thriving Reno competition, ASC.
We can't, you have significantly broken up and we
Most
can't,
of
at
the
least I can't hear it.
major general contractors go to on an annual basis and find some really good. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's okay. I think we're going to ask you to repeat all that because it sounded like really good information that we couldn't hear. And so I do want to make sure that you have the consistent connectivity. If you want, you're welcome to take your camera off for while you're speaking and then put it back on later. Sometimes that helps with bandwidth.
Let me try this. Can you hear me now? If not, I'll put it in the chat.
Yes, it seems to be consistent now. Could you repeat what you said, please?
Oh, I was just saying, besides the CTE programs, also consider a lot of the construction management programs throughout the state and across the West. A lot of those schools and universities attend the ASC Reno competition, which has some of the best and brightest college students coming into the industry. It's where a lot of the general contractors find some of their potential candidates, and I would think it'd be a good source for future inspection candidates also. And my main comment, the reason why I asked is because if we're really having a difficulty finding potential DSA inspectors, and we all know that there's an aging workforce, but there really is no recruitment, then maybe it's a separate offline conversation where we coordinate with some of the industry organizations, whether it's AGC, AIA, and truly have a targeted recruitment. Because when you think about all the construction happening throughout the state of California, with whether it's superintendents or whether it's design professionals, I would think that there'd be a huge opportunity to attract candidates to some of the DSA inspector positions as people's careers change, as companies fluctuate with their workloads. But without a targeted recruitment plan, I think that's part of the problem, but maybe we figure out how best to have a recruitment plan and target helping DSA to find those future inspectors.
On the ASCE Reno competition, do they have engagement, like if we were have a presence there to be able to provide information, they do have a method for that to occur? Do you know?
Oh, yes, definitely. You have booths, you have areas, you have the chance to set up and interview those students. A lot of those students even come from the industry already, and they're back to school after working in the industry for 5 years, 10 years. So a lot of those students you may have with a lot of experience already.
Great, thank you. I don't know.
Where can we
Diane,
get information? I'm not familiar with that. You refer to it as ASCE's, the Reno section, I would assume, of ASCE.
Yeah,
And it's a competition they have? Is there a formal name for it, or?
yeah, it's ASC, ASC.
Oh, ASC.
Yeah, ASC.
Contractors.
ASC
Yeah.
Reno competition. You could just Google that and you'll get all the
That's
information
my
about
engineer inserting the E at the end of ASC. Okay, so check out ASC's website
yeah, I think it's
for more information.
Associated Students in Construction.
Okay, thank you.
Diane, I don't know, did you explain at all our the apprentice program? And I don't know if that's something that also might be an interface that we have with the schools and also in our outreach. I know that Fred had said with the information, and I'm not sure if Fred's aware of the apprentice program, that maybe that's the perfect avenue for students to be able to come in, and that would be a good introduction into the community colleges.
So,
and I know I'm doing this
I
cold
don't
turkey.
have, yeah, I don't have that information at my fingertips, but it's an assistant inspector, not an apprentice.
Sorry.
And they may work under the supervision of the DSA project inspector assigned to the project. And we do have an approval form for them. I just don't have that at my fingertips. If I find it later in the meeting, I'll bring it up. But Fred, I will definitely, in fact, we'll include this DSA 175 as part of the meeting materials. And if I end up finding more information about that spells out the assistant inspectors and how to get on board with that. But I think basically, if I understand it correctly, it would be working, that's how you would get the experience. And that's gonna, if I go back through here, there is, it would be working, I thought somewhere it said working as an assistant right here. Yeah. So that's one of the avenues. If you get, you could have 1 year qualifying experience as an assistant project inspector. So if you were able to show 1 year of experience working as a DSA assistant inspector, that could be used to qualify to sit for the exam.
Thank you, Diane.
Yeah, on
Welcome.
that assistant project inspector, is that student eligible in the sense of, is that a good, are there quals for that? And is that a good avenue in engagement with the community colleges?
Yeah, I'll have to get more information on that.
Okay.
I don't know, but I will definitely look into it and provide an answer on that. One of the things that does come to mind that I'm not seeing on the form here, I'm sure it's buried somewhere, but the minimum age, and I don't know the history on this. I don't know, David Karina, if you happen to know.
He has his hand up, so I'm interested to hear what he says.
But there's
go
a
ahead and address
minimum
the minimum age issue.
It's a minimum age requirement. It's in our regulations, a minimum age of 25, which seems puzzling to me because if they have the qualifications, why does the age matter? But I don't know the history, and no one I've talked to yet knows, other than that's how it's always been. So still looking for the answer on that, but looking at, that might be something we'd be looking to strike if we can't find the rationale for it.
And I think what's important too for Fred, and when you engage with your colleagues on this discussion, is to look at our quals and see what your schools offer, as well as programs, to see if there's some changes that need to happen to our quals, just to provide greater either flexibility, specificity, whatever may work in the sense of what's being offered out there to train future inspectors so that they can see the pathway from that education into the program. David, you've been patient with your hand up, so thank you.
Hand's getting tired. Anyway, maybe I can help address the concern about the age, and it's probably a social stigma, but a lot of people will look at, say, a 20-year-old, 21-year-old that really doesn't have that much experience as a journeyman, and you're dealing with people that a lot of times the trades, whether it's an iron worker, sheet metal worker, a concrete, somebody that's been doing it 20, 30 years, has a social problem probably with somebody younger than their own children that's coming up saying you're doing this wrong. It's an acceptability thing. I personally experienced this myself when I was in the trades. I came in this as a general contractor. What was my background before I became a project inspector. And a lot of times it takes that long to build that type of experience before you can actually judge another person's work or compare it to plans and documents and whether or not they have the education that takes behind it, because there really should be some continuing education requirements. A lot of people, we do the recertification every 4 years, and I'm sure you hear all the complaints, people call up and I get the calls because I'm being with ACIA. I don't know, for anybody that doesn't know, I'm representing American Construction Inspectors Association. We've been around for 60 years. I've been around a little bit longer than 60 years myself, but I'm part of that aging group myself, but not ready to throw in the towel. But that was just addressing, I don't know if that helps you or not. It's easy to sit, when you're sitting in your office and you're not on a construction site with that kind of language being used out on the site, people rushing around. It's like a football team. Everybody knows where they got to be. And it's an experience thing that they look at. I was going to also add that whatever information that you forward to Fred and I have known each other well for over 20 years. If you could forward me some of that, we'd be happy at ACIA to post anything on our website, because any changes that get made, I get a lot of phone calls from inspectors. They complain about, hey, really, I hate this new system, how you have to renew the certification and all that. And then you have a lot of the people, and I think I've had conversations with, I'm sorry, I can't remember the other person's name that was in charge when I redid mine, but I went through it for the first time last year and it was fairly seamless, but you get a lot of people you get guys 50, 60 years old that are really good at their job, tradesmen, but not good on a computer. So that's why you're losing a lot of people too. A lot of guys are just throwing in the towel. They'll be about 60 years old and they go, man, I could go another 10 years, but they're just making it too hard for me. But they really don't want to put the work in. It may be an idea to think about a training session, how to teach people to use the computer. ACIA we would even consider putting a seminar together, maybe with Fred's help, on how to better utilize the system that's been adapted now for the online certification, so that we don't lose people, because you have a lot of guys that are just giving up, that have a lot of years left to give, but they're like, okay, I'm on the fence. I could retire or I could renew it. Man, it's just, I've tried it, I'm giving up. But I think if we can reach out to those people as well and make it to where they better understand what's needed, because there's a little pressure involved with it as well.
Thank you for that feedback, David. In that engagement, we do have opportunities now that when we have some kind of collaborative session, and I know for you, this might be something, and I'd be interested in your feedback on this, obviously, to have a Zoom session on how to electronically renew your certification may be indicated. I'm not quite sure, but ideally we'd like to have a virtual engagement on this so that we can record it, so that people can see it, and
Yeah.
obviously have that training live on. But obviously, if they may be electronically challenged to begin with, I'm trying to figure out how to get there. And so in that
is tough.
engagement, I think that would be important. Maybe it is in person, but we still videotape it, right? I don't want to be ironically counter programming what we're trying to achieve on that. But I do see the value of that. So whether it's in person or whether it's virtual and recorded, I think trying to capture some of that training, then the schools can use it. Go look on DSA Academy. There's input here on, or even not necessarily specifically the one for those recertification of the aging inspectors, but even for new inspectors of maybe there's something we can create as well that says, this is what a project inspector does. This is what the engagement is. This is part of the process. Are you interested? And trying to see on that as well. Thank you. Fred, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Ida, one of the places where improvement is needed is probably not on your folks' side, but getting back to what Dave was talking about and how some of the younger ones get stereotyped. Usually in the complaints that the regional managers would hear probably come down to leadership skills. And a lot of them are not familiar with California Administrative Code, or what the duties of the inspector are, what the duties of the architect are, what the duties of the CM and the owner are. Knowing all of those things and a little bit of coaching and some added leadership skills would go a long way.
I think that's a great way to partner, correct?
It is. And we're going to get Dave to be one of the instructors, seeing how he's one of the best inspectors I've ever worked with.
This is the forum to make those connections, obviously. Plus, we have everyone else here that can attest to that request being made and that commitment being honored.
I'll accept that Pepsi challenge, Fred.
Thank you.
Actually, I did before the DSA Academy was revived back in 2007. I actually taught DSA inspection down here in at the Orange County Community College District, and we trained probably in the 3-year period close to 300 students that were in there, and these were a lot of tradespeople that were coming in. This was a night session from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. 3 nights a week, and a lot of those people, I'm happy to say, are still for DSA and OSHPD inspectors to this day, and it's really, it was a great program. And then that was at that time that DSA decided to reopen and reactivate the DSA Academy. Actually, this is in my bio. I donated all of that curriculum because I had Jeff Enzer was running the inspection program at the time, and I can't remember his successor's name, but all of that was approved by them, reviewed and approved before we taught the classes, and then that was all donated back to the DSA Academy. But whatever I can do to help.
It's very interesting, David. Yeah, if you've told me that before, I've forgotten that history, but that's very helpful to know. I do appreciate the feedback. We are aware of the challenges with computer literacy among some of our aging inspectors. And I will say my staff does work one-on-one to do trial sessions and walk them through the LMS. Also, our recertification exam is online as well. And so Erica will set up basically like a test session to make sure they know how to access everything. But I think we could be more efficient about it in some sort of training or information maybe, so we're not having to do that one-on-one. So I'm almost wondering, because we are looking at, again, with the things we're working on, we're looking at converting our exam to being completely paperless. So the inspector candidates will come into our office, but they will be on a computer. They'll still have their Scantron for now, but as we transition to that, I wonder if we could also offer the same services, or if it would be beneficial, rather than them having to access the LMS at home or the exam at home, they could come in again and we'd have staff assistants to help them navigate it. But definitely looking forward to collaborating and continuing the conversation with you, David, and Fred and Clint. Appreciate the feedback. Clint actually has his hand raised again, so I should call on you. Yeah.
I'm sorry. One more.
I'm
final
looking at
comment.
like one screen and the other screen, and so I don't see the raised hand. Thank you.
And I hope I'm clear and I'm not breaking up, but I just wanted to piggyback on, I think it was Fred's comment about young people, which I agree. But then also, when you get to be my age, young is a relative term. So when I think of young, somebody who's in their 30s and 40s is young to me. And I think somebody who's in their 30s and 40s is very savvy with computers and technology. And we see a lot of people who've been in the industry since their teens and are looking for something different as they've been in the industry for 10 or 15 years. So keep that in mind also. And then the final comment, we talked about at the last PSCC meeting, and I bring it up again because I think, Ida, you had shared numbers at CCFC last week when you spoke, and you talked about the pipeline and what's in DSA's court right now for review. But if there is a problem with inspectors or only so many inspectors, just curious if there is a metric in terms of what DSA needs for the amount of work that's coming in the pipeline. If there's 200, 300, 400 inspectors that are a certain class throughout the state, but there's $11 billion worth of work, then there's probably got to be a metric that says we need, or DSA needs, X number of inspectors to handle the amount of workload. Otherwise, the contractors like us are the ones that are complaining about the DSA inspectors or the lack of them, or QC issues with them and some of the problems that we've seen in the past. So just if we keep that in mind, how many inspectors do we have in the state versus the amount of work that's coming? And we should be able to track that on a regular basis to see if there is a need, or if there is the capacity can be handled by those that are already certified.
So I think in this discussion, we have identified, I believe that our inspectors are aging. So I think an analysis of who's coming in and their relative age and experience, and who's retiring. We don't get advance notice when they're retiring, and it's, I believe, what, on a 3-year certification cycle, Diane, or 4. So obviously it's that tracking makes it difficult because we don't know who plans to retire, to track it specifically to workload. I will say, however, I think part of the perspective that's important is to understand what difficulties are out there to either keeping valuable inspectors who are deciding to retire due to some policy procedure to see if it can be addressed, such as online recertification. Obviously, as the profession ages out, those who are younger will be proficient at it. I'm pleased to hear that Diane does offer those, or Diane's staff offers those tutorials to try to demystify the requirement to take the online exam and create that familiarity absent the actual exam format. But just even understanding what an inspector does, I think what's important is having the conversation and the engagement continue. And just like we had on our back check discussion, having real world examples of somewhere where there might be an obstacle of trying to find someone in a specific regional area. I think in starting the collaborative discussion initially, it helps to expand the problem solving as those concerns arise as we move forward. I'm not sure, Diane, you could respond specifically to being able to track, but I know that there's the cyclical renewal. And so it's difficult, I think, to understand that. We could probably provide statistics as to how many retire in a given year to know how many actually need to be coming in and looking at that delta. But
Yeah,
Diane,
I think, yeah, the only data we have is so we'll know who is currently certified, and there's different classes of inspector within that. And so right now, I think we're in and around the 900 range statewide for all inspector classes who are, their certification is current and valid. So yeah, as far as retiring, I guess we would find out when they don't recertify. So that's the every 4 years. But what we do offer on our DSA, add it up here, we have on our, we have this DSA webpage, apply and maintain project inspector certification. So that this has anything and everything about project inspectors. But we do bi-weekly, we send out, again, it's an electronic poll. It's a SurveyMonkey poll to all of those in 900 odd project inspectors. And it's a voluntary questionnaire for them to complete regarding their availability and also what counties they're available to work on. And we're about due for another update, I see here, because it was last done on the 30th. And then that produces a spreadsheet, which we post. If you click on this link there, there's a spreadsheet that shows, you know, their name, their contact information, when are they going to be available, what class are they, and then what county. So that could be sorted by county if you have a project going up. And again, this is depending on if they respond to us, but that's their opportunity to raise their hand to say, I'm available for work starting on this day. So there may be others outside of this we're not capturing. I know there's certain inspectors, certain inspector firms who have agreements with school districts who may not be reflected on this availability list, but that's what we've been doing so far to track availability, and that's public on our website, so anyone can check that out at any time.
thank you, Diane. David, Karina, I think what also might be valuable is the perspective of the project inspector as to why it's a good field to work in. Independence, or you know what I'm saying, that the soft skills and the intangibles that are not part of certification, but and as any profession, it's important to hear from project inspectors and their perspective and why they are project inspectors and why they enjoy it or why they see it as a good career choice for these XXX reasons. And so I think that any of that is information that might also be helpful to Fred and the others who are working on education programs, right, to understand those aspects of project inspectors that may provide perspective as to having it be a viable program that someone may want to pursue in the future. Jeff Becker, you have a comment?
Yeah, thanks, Ida. I really appreciated listening to this conversation, really from a macro level. I will offer a school district perspective, maybe with the purpose of creating some urgency around this issue and some shared responsibility of DSA and us to do some recruitment in this area. So there are, I looked at the link on Diane's, the certified project inspector list for Fresno County as we were talking. There are 7 class 1 inspectors in Fresno County. One,
that are
unfortunately,
available at this moment, or
there are 7 listed in the entirety of class 1. So on the other link, Diane,
on the e-tracker link.
Yes,
yeah,
on the there are 7. One passed away a few weeks ago.
Oh no.
Geez.
Unfortunately, one is semi-retired and only working for a specific district. One basically has a relationship with a large district that has contracted for all of his capacity. We have 32 districts in Fresno County. I have just at the county office 25 projects coming through DSA right now. and I can't find inspectors at all. And I realize that is a local micro view of this, but I bring it up to create some urgency to not continue to only talk at the macro level. This is a real problem today for school districts, that we can't find inspectors. Larger districts with large bond programs have contacted me and said, hey, Jeff, who do you use? I can't find anybody. So it's real today. So anything that we can do to get in front, Clint, you suggested that group, the ASE group in Reno, anything that DSA can do to get in front of them to say, hey, here's a great career path. And this is how you get certified with us. And then there's 1,000 districts in California that you could be working for. I think that I want to just create that sense of urgency. So more of a comment than a question, but appreciate the time.
I appreciate that note.
Oh.
Yeah, I appreciate that note on the urgency, because it just translates to contractors who are under contract needing to have continuous inspections to keep a job on schedule. So we'd hate to have to keep going back to owners or school districts if the problem is a DSA inspector can't commit to the schedule of construction because they're stretched too thin. And even though Jeff has mentioned 7 in Fresno County, I would imagine if you just go out to the surrounding counties, it's probably worse, since many of those inspectors are doing work in adjacent or surrounding counties also.
Jeff, on that note, I know that K-12 schools are a bit removed from the career path education process, but in the sense of as it gets to project inspector, but do you see a role in any of your classes and in any of the educational settings in the high schools that can say, consider like counseling, or I'm just curious, like it just seems to be an all hands on deck effort. And as it's what's difficult for us is we certify, and we can do outreach, but we're not touching the students who are actually always looking for that career path. Where we touch them is they're already on an associated career path or likewise. So I'm just curious and for any of you on the PSCC, especially in the high school programs, what is available to plant the seed?
I would offer, Ida, that a number of districts now are coming up with rather robust CTE programs in the building trades in various pathways. A lot of them are dual enrollment programs. So like with the community colleges, Fred's group, there may be some dual enrollment happening there. And again, those are great things that we're doing. It's a long game though.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to be doing those and something to help with the immediacy of the issue.
Yes.
The other thing I'll offer is county offices, and I can have one of my colleagues who chairs the County School Facilities Consortium. County offices could have a role in maybe aggregating some of this information. The 80-20 rule is real in California schools, where 80% of the districts are small districts and 80% of the kids are educated by 20% of the big districts. And those small districts, they may have a project every couple of years or even less frequently. And so it's very difficult for them to get their voice heard in this. And when they're looking for an inspector, they find out because the architect says, okay, now we're going to go to bid, you're going to need an inspector. Who do you want to work with? And they're really disadvantaged in that regard.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, one of the things.
Oops, you're mute, David. Somehow you got mute.
I did it again, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
A lot of the districts hire exclusively through brokers or inspection firms. It seems like for a long run there, as soon as somebody got their DSA 1 or 2, they opened up a firm. They had a relative or somebody that was in charge of construction at their district, and they got hired. And not just them, but there's a lot of independent inspectors that don't want to work for firms because, and I've had experiences when I first started that weren't particularly, I was actually instructed more than once to back off of any non-compliance notices, things that would end up getting me in court. So I decided to just become an independent myself. The district should probably consider opening up to hiring some independents. There's a lot of talent out there where people don't want to work for somebody that has only been in business for a couple of years and is telling them they're micromanaging the project inspector and telling them how to inspect their project because they don't want to ruffle any feathers and possibly not get another contract, or they'll just replace the inspector. At ACI, we've had a lot of inspectors ask us over the years, hey, something's got to be done because I did my job, but they told me, hey, I've got to do this way, or I'm not going to work in this district anymore, or they're going to blackball me from the industry. And independents have a lot to offer. If you just stick with the firms, all they're going to do is if they get one complaint, they're going to replace that guy with somebody else, that inspector. And they really, a lot of them don't have this big roster. They don't have a bench in the hall, like, so to speak. I get calls every week from somebody will have their wife, their girlfriend, their significant other, just go down the list and make phone calls. Hi, this is so-and-so from XYZ Inspection. We've got a really great project for you. Why don't you send me your resume? And what happens is there's a few districts, LA is one of them. I don't know if they've changed that, but if they get a project inspector's resume, at least this was in the past, and if that resume for that particular project inspector was submitted by one firm, they won't accept that person's resume from any other firm. So now that person, and if they don't get the project, this firm doesn't get the project, everybody they submitted there cannot work at this district. And that's no blame on the district themselves, that's their policy. But that's why I don't send my resume to these firms that give me cold calls. So there's a lot of practice that goes on out there in the field that maybe some of you don't see. And it's discouraging to a lot of people where they just give up. And I've heard people in the past, we'll meet them at a seminar or something. Yeah, hey, did you ever get a call from this person? Yes, I did. Yeah, they never got the job and I never got anything and I passed up something else for it. And when my cert's expired, I'm not going to renew it. So anyway, consider the independents too. You could have somebody from your own district even make phone calls.
Thank you for that feedback, David. As DSA doesn't have any regulatory process for the brokers.
I understand.
And no, and I appreciate it because I think what's important is that if that whole process that's in some way self-created hinders project inspectors, it should be looked at, obviously, because that's an obstacle that has been created out of the process instead of something that is part of the process. I really do appreciate that feedback.
Yeah, it was out of your hands. I know this is out of DSA's hands because even back when I was on the board, we get those kind of calls and complaints all the time, and the board's hands are tied. So we understand DSA can't get involved with any contractual obligations or anything, but it's become a normal practice now. 20 years ago, the districts were all hiring independents, but then there was a few guys that were making big money by securing a lot of different, tying up a lot of different districts. And there's so many different firms out there now. There was some really crazy names for some of these. I remember one was Bad Boy Inspections, and Fred, you might remember some of these guys. Wild West Inspections. Anybody, they come up with a name, and the independents really didn't have much of a chance because they would apply for a project with a district, and the district chose to go with a firm because they were planning ahead, saying, well, if something happens, if you get hit by a bus, this firm here can go ahead and replace you. So I'm just giving this as information, only what's going on in the real world out there.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Okay.
I do. Very informative. All right. We are at 11:15 and we do have other items on the agenda. I think that this has been a really good discussion. I just want to offer the opportunity for final comments before we move on to the agenda from anyone. But as I stated before, the conversation is ongoing. If there's anything that you need to add to this conversation, please send us an email specifically on Project Inspector to Diane and myself. But we will meet internally and discuss trying to partner with you, Fred and David and Clint, specifically on some of the contacts. At least we can get started on that and see if we can at least get the word out more and then see where we can advance from there. Thank you so much. Diane, any final thoughts from you before we transition?
No, just thank you. This was wonderful, very helpful feedback. And yes, I expect I'll be talking with several of you in the near future to get some more details, but thank you.
Thank you. All right. Item 7 is legislative updates. I know that AB 358 is the community college student housing. I did do some outreach last week on the process or on AB 358 and its complexity. So this may be repetitive to some of you, but I think it's important to address to the PSCC, just so you know where we're advancing with this in DSA, and as you all are representative of the groups, that if, you know, in your channels, you can get some of this concern out as well. So let me share my screen real quick. Okay. It's this one. All right. AB 358 designated residential housing as a building used for students attending a campus of community college and defines that residential housing is not a school building, which thus removes DSA from review for both structural safety and accessibility plan review and construction oversight. Interestingly enough, it didn't remove our fire life safety oversight, so that's one of the issues that was created. It does provide that community college districts can submit to DSA upon request. DSA says that if you do request that review, it will be designed to the Field Act. There is an alternative process for community college review to be standard code requirements. Diane has more detail on that. However, I do believe that if it does go through standard design requirements, it would still need to be signed under the Field Act. Is that correct? Diane, is designated as not Field Act compliant, correct? If they're,
I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, there should be signage. I was getting into
so if
stamping
school
and
district,
signing. Yeah, yeah.
no, if school
Signage.
districts pursue the alternative compliance path for community colleges that exists in the code, it would still need to be signed, correct? The facility needs to be designated, right?
Correct.
There are some issues that have been created. We did not have an opportunity to engage with the author, and so that's why we're trying to address these issues now. DSA has met with the California building officials to assist them in letting them know that school housing may be coming to them. They were quite surprised on that as well. So we're here to offer you a couple of pointers on making the decision of whether or not school buildings and school student housing, CCD student housing, should come to DSA or not when you're making that choice. Where are we? Okay, so there's greater complexity as having jurisdiction on the community college campus if you go to the locals. Obviously, there's 545 building departments in the state of California. Some of the questions that haven't been answered is if DSA retains Fire Life Safety Review Authority. Yes, we do. We are looking at providing a bulletin with FAQs on our website, or actually a downloadable bulletin on our website, so that school districts can be aware of those decisions of going whether to the locals or to DSA and making those decisions early as to the appropriateness for the project. It's important to understand that the school building is the building specifically. The Field Act does cover utility infrastructure. It does cover site improvements and parking. Those are still considered school improvements. So if your housing project is on a community college campus proper and you want to tap into those utilities, or you want to have other students accessing the housing project either for its parking facilities, and meaning that the parking facilities aren't exclusive, or if there are any educational spaces in that housing project, that really should come to DSA review, specifically because if there's educational facilities, they are required to be Field Act compliant, or spaces, I should say. The site, if it's going not to be exclusive for students, and preserving the fact that in the future you may not want them exclusive for students, those should come to DSA for review. In understanding all that, if a student housing building is on a community college campus proper, your most predictable authority for your schedule and for completion and for not creating additional complexity would be to come to DSA for review. Obviously, it is still your choice. And this is also out there for the design professionals who are on the PSCC, in if there's engagement with your school districts on these issues as well, in raising some of these issues if they're asking for your guidance or your input. Obviously, when you request your plans to be reviewed by DSA, the student housing field oversight is included. Going to the locals, you would be subject to scheduled inspections, which are usually typical next business day. We would require a project inspector to provide that continuous inspection. So that is a fundamental difference as well. There is a question as well if local authorities are required to accept projects for review. Interestingly enough, in the law, it did not specifically defer to the locals. It was assumed, obviously, for the protection of your students and the community college, someone should review. So the local authorities don't believe they are required to review, but they are researching that with their attorneys. And so you may counter differences from one jurisdiction to another where they'll say, we're not accepting those projects. And that's up to them. DSA doesn't really get involved in that. One of the critical items is, of course, access compliance. Up until AB 358 was passed, or actually this whole year until January 1st, when AB 358 becomes effective, DSA is the only entity that did student housing that was both housing at a place of public education and public housing. That's a unique pathway in the code. The reason why I say we're the only ones who did it and the locals didn't is that only occurs on community college districts, campuses, UCs, and CSUs when it comes from the access compliance perspective. And DSA is that jurisdiction for CSUs, UCs, for access compliance, and CCD. And so your local jurisdictions have not reviewed projects that are housing at a place of education and public housing and may not be well versed in the complex accessibility requirements. And so what's also critical about that is, whereas CSUs and UCs have a housing program, and so if there is non-compliance, while they might still need to correct it, those students can still have an opportunity to be housed elsewhere on campus while corrections are being made. If there's a problem, CCDs, usually this is your first project, and this is the beginning of your housing program, and you don't have a housing program to fall back on. And so I do caution that the access compliance component is critical to get right at plan review and construction. We are working with local building officials, have offered to train them on housing, but obviously they need to avail themselves of that training. So I do want to caution that access compliance review is very critical. Just some more thoughts about AB 358. If you do go to the locals, they are not going to waive requirements for you. Local ordinances, local planning process, local impact fees, local building code amendments, local energy amendments, including REACH codes, depending on jurisdictions. I believe we have at least 40 cities that have reached codes out there that exceed the requirements of the energy code and Cal Green. Interestingly enough, DSA is the authority for Cal Green residential for schools specifically. If it's residential housing, we don't have requirements because we haven't really had a component. Community colleges don't typically provide housing, so we didn't have a regulatory process for residential Cal Green requirements. We were about to embark on that because we saw that housing was coming up, but now that housing is not a school building, we have to see if we have legally the authority to create those Cal Green residential requirements. If you do go to the locals, they will apply Cal Green residential requirements that they have to apply. And then, of course, scheduled inspections, as I really already mentioned, and then also that it's difficult. You can't occupy the building unless a certificate of occupancy is issued by the locals. So these elements were not really, and we came up with this list by interfacing with the building officials that we met with to say, we'd like to help our community college districts help make a decision as to whether they should go to the locals or go to DSA. Can you tell us what they would face? Because many of them have never had to go through your process. And so this is a lot of the list that they came up with. I just want you to know that at DSA, we're here to assist you with your projects in any way you can. Obviously, we will take student housing projects, and the law permits that they can come to DSA. Upon your request, we will accept them. And just if there is scheduling and timing that's associated with those projects, meet with DSA early so that we can provide that information. Meet with your locals early if you want to still make that determination, and hopefully they will grant some kind of insight to you as well in making the decisions on how to have your housing projects advance. I will say that if your housing project is completely off campus, not tied to campus proper, that may be an ideal project to go to the locals, meet with them and determine if that's the case. When it's on a campus, it does create additional complexity for DSA. And obviously, if it's not designed to the Field Act, there are requirements in the Ed Code that were not waived in identifying those structures as non-Field Act compliant. And so that's just some of the information that I wanted to share, and I will take any questions on AB 358 before we move to SB 515 and SB 760. Sorry, I'm trying to actually get to see. There we go. Okay. All right. Any questions on that? All right. If there are none, SB 515, Eric, do you want to discuss that one? Is Eric still with us?
Eric had to drop off.
Eric had to drop off. Okay, I'll discuss that. SB 515 is shade structures, and it was addressing path of travel improvements to shade structures. And beginning January 1st, 2024, if you're installing a shade structure on one of your campuses, path of travel improvements are limited to 20% of the adjusted construction cost. Of course, these shade structures in the law specifies that they must be from our PC, pre-checked approved list. So it's limited to those projects. Its purpose was to really address the mitigation of extreme heat on many campuses that perhaps do not often make improvements to their school buildings due to lack of local funding resources. But there is a grant program out there under CAL FIRE that is targeted specifically to address extreme heat, of which shade structures might be a viable option in utilizing those funds. So now there's many smaller jurisdictions that have access to funding if they get it from the grant and can install shade structures on their campuses. As part of that grant funding, they will cover 20% of path of travel improvements. If you're specifying a pre-checked approved shade structure, getting those grant funds, this requirement for path of travel improvements now aligns in that requirement. Of course, this requirement would still apply even if you're not securing those funds, right? It does say the installation of shade structures limits path of travel improvements to 20%. If you are doing these projects, meet with DSA to get greater clarity on where that 20% is best spent, and understand that installations of shade structures that are remote from the campus proper, say across a playground that's grass, will require that connectivity to happen. And that's not a path of travel improvement. That's actually part of the project, because you need to make that connection to your campus proper in an accessible manner. So that's why we say, reach out to us, meet with us on if you're advancing those projects. We will be providing probably greater clarity before the first of the year as well on this issue through some format, whether it's a bulletin, IR, I'm not quite sure. Any questions on SB 515? Okay, moving along. SB 760 requires schools to have an all-gender restroom. It does not mean that all-gender restroom means multi-user. Obviously, you can meet it with a single-user restroom or a multi-user restroom. I will advise that I know that many of your single-user restrooms under a previous law were already converted to all-gender restrooms. If that hasn't occurred on your campus and you are designating a restroom as all-gender in order to meet the requirements of SB 760, just a reminder that facility should also be an accessible restroom. Obviously, you wouldn't want to get into any legal issues for meeting the requirements of the law and not providing that restroom in an accessible manner. Any questions on SB 760? Okay, so now we're moving to item 8, cost estimating template. In our discussions on the existing buildings task force, of which some of you are members, some of you are not, we are still exploring options to a code change on that. We've made some improvements to procedural changes on regarding testing for those requirements, but one of the parallel efforts was trying to simplify the process of submitting cost estimates. And we've been working with a cost estimating consultant to develop those templates, and we had provided to some of you the cost estimating template to test out. And so I know that affects very few of you on here. However, if any of you have tested the template and want to provide input, you're welcome to do so here and now. And obviously we are working on that as well through outside of this process and sending a lot. Harlan is here. Harlan's the one who's leading this charge as a regional manager on these templates, and he will be receiving the comments, but he's here to answer any questions if you have regarding those templates right now. Do any of you have any comments on that? I know we had sent those out to a few of you and then followed up last week, and you guys are busy, so you may not have had that opportunity, but we do ask that you work on that this week and get us that feedback so that we can get these out on the street. No comment? Okay, awesome. Regional office updates. So this is just an opportunity for the regional managers, if there's anything that they want to share in their offices regarding workload, patients, anything specific. If there's something you want to address with them, I will offer that each one of them have an opportunity to speak. They may not have anything to report, but after that, I will offer an opportunity for each of you to address them individually if there's a specific concern. So I'm going to start with Office 1, which is Chris Morton. Chris?
Thanks, Ida. In the beginning, when I introduced myself as the new regional manager, it's a common theme in Oakland that change is occurring in the office. We've had the retirement of a couple of longtime staff members. The one that some of you on this call may have worked with is Dan Chu, our project services supervisor, who assisted with certification and closeout. So we're in the process of filling positions in the Oakland office. We have interim solutions, but if you have any concerns or can't find the right person, I encourage you to reach out to me and I'll direct your request as needed, but hopefully we'll have those positions filled shortly. Our workload is increasing. Our typical end of year increase that we see is occurring. Registrations have bumped up. Not a lot of really large projects, but just a lot of projects in general. I think we're starting to see some of the submittals of stuff for summer work as well. We'll probably get swamped in December with the projects coming in that your design teams are getting to us before they close up shop for the holidays. We may be a little behind, but then January always slows down in registrations, so we quickly catch back up then as well. We also have third-party consultants lined up and overtime that we're offering to our staff. So we'll do everything we can to shorten any period where there may be a little bit of a delay in the reviews. That's all I've got for Oakland.
Does anyone have a question for Chris? All right, seeing none, I'm going to pass it to Harlan.
Yeah, hi. So I just wanted to throw this out there. If you have any questions about our processes, code questions, or any kind of feedback at all, please reach out to us. This is a partnership between DSA, the school districts, and the design professionals to provide housing for our students. We don't want to operate in a vacuum, and if you have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear them. We're always available 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, whether we're in the office or working on at our remote locations. So anything at all, please give us a call. We're open.
Any comments for Harlan? Great. Okay, I will pass it now to Dave Brown, who's substituting for Doug.
Thanks, Ida. Just similar to Oakland, we've had some staff changes recently, most notably Michael Chorda, one of our supervising structural engineers, retired at the end of last year and has been replaced by CM Lin, Qingming Lin. He's been around DSA for a while and is very knowledgeable, and he's been taking up that role with a lot of skill and expertise. We also have some structural engineer plan review positions that we've recently just picked up some new staff, as well as a new access reviewer due to some retirements. We've brought on some really great talent to help bolster our already great team of reviewers and business staff, and we're really happy to just be in the spot that we're at. We're also seeing a pickup in our workload recently, a lot of smaller projects and a handful of really big ones. And it's always an interesting juggle, but it seems like all of our groups are managing the schedules successfully. And I would just echo what Harlan just said. If there's any questions or concerns about specific projects or timelines or something that's going on, feel free to reach out to the regional manager in our office, Doug Humphrey. He is always available, and feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Any questions for David? Okay, now I'm passing it to you, Aaron, in place of Craig.
No problem. Yeah, I don't know if it's a good thing that I went last or a bad thing. Yeah, just echoing what the other three managers said, we are operating at full capacity, no open positions, effectively and efficiently getting through the workload, other than obviously the large elephant in the room. Craig Rush, the regional manager, will be retiring in, I think, Q1 of next year. That position has been advertised, and I believe we're performing interviews at the end of the month, as Ida had mentioned, with the hopes of replacing or finding a replacement and having a significant amount of overlap to so Craig can pass on all of his intricacies and enjoyable attributes to the next person. And similar to what Chris said, we're seeing similar workload levels 2023 versus 2022. We're seeing about 100 more projects, but about $500,000 less in project value. So a lot of smaller stuff, but seeing things pick up. We haven't had any reason to use consultants or any overtime throughout 2023, even though we had to use about 12 consultants and a lot of overtime in the end of the quarter of 2022 and early 2023, just because of the code cycle change. But I don't know if anybody knows, but because of the electronic plan review environment, the 4 offices meet on a biweekly basis and exchange our staffing schedules and go through those together and are able to pass work in between offices in order to keep everybody working efficiently and getting the work flowing through as best we can, which is a really great advantage for the electronic environment and working with the other offices. So that's all I have.
Great. Thank you, Erin. Does anyone have any questions for Erin?
Just congratulations to Craig.
Yes, we will miss him. We will miss him, that's for sure. I'm sure the San Diego office will obviously feel the impact even greater, right?
Yep.
Craig tends to be a little larger than life, I think, so.
Is he going to pass that on, Ida?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I'm both concerned and pleased at the prospect. Okay, we're at item number 10. This is your opportunity. We have about 15 minutes. If there's any issues you want to bring up for further discussion in our next meeting, or if there's any concerns you want to address, any comments you want to address to the group. Thank you, Clint. I will go to you first. I like now that Teams addresses this in order of people raising their hands and puts them right at the top. So this is awesome. Thank you, Clint. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick question. Thank you. I wanted to go back to item number 8 on the agenda. I guess I wanted a little bit more background. It's the cost estimating template test. My question, you said you guys are simplifying the process. So is that cost estimating template related to project costs? Is there a component that's construction costs? And then you mentioned using the consultant, but I just want to get a little bit more background, because if it's anything related to construction costs, then obviously any of the major general contractors across the state do a regular market analysis, either on a monthly or a quarterly basis. And just to make sure that if there's any concern or interest, that besides the estimating consultant, there might be a need just to tap into the construction community or contractor community also as needed to get really accurate cost information, if that's the intent.
Thank you, Clint. I was remiss in not being very clear as to the purpose of our cost estimating templates, but I'm going to defer to Harlan and give him the stage. If that's okay, Harlan, I can put you on the spot on our engagement with our cost estimate consultant and the purpose of the templates, so that you can assist the group with providing greater clarity than I did.
And thank you for the questions, Clint. So the cost estimating template was developed in response to the IREB4 document that we had published, and requiring the cost estimate is one of the ways that we can evaluate a building when it's submitted to us to determine whether or not it would require seismic rehabilitation or mitigation of some sort. And the code states that if we exceed 50% of the value of the building or replacement value of the building, then it kicks it into a seismic rehabilitation project. And a lot of the feedback that we got when we have been enforcing this requirement of the code was that we're getting numbers from one of our sister agencies that were quite a bit lower than the actual cost of the building. And so we wanted to address that. And so when we engaged the cost estimating group, we wanted to develop something that was a tool that everybody could use, that was pretty equal across the board. And it would identify all of the items that would be included in the replacement value of the building. And it would exclude some of the things that we would consider as replacement cost. And so in developing this template, we've got basically all of the line items, or we hope to have all of the line items that would be required in evaluating these buildings, whether you're replacing the building or you're rehabilitating the building. And this is one of the three methods of evaluating the cost of the building. So you've got an OPSC number, you've got our cost estimate number, or you have basically a method of comparing buildings that have been built recently in your district or in your area. And I think the benefit of using this cost estimating template is that it lessens the confusion about what costs are considered and what costs are excluded. And so in the end, what we want to do is we want to have everybody use this cost estimating template, and it can be prepared by a cost estimating firm. It can be prepared by a contractor, or some of the design professionals have an in-house cost estimator. So we really don't care who is going to be preparing this cost estimate, but we do want to have the consistency of the different line items that are in the cost estimate. And your question as to basically the evaluating the costs as in real time, our cost estimator will be providing, or our cost estimating contractor will be providing us updates on a semi-annual, is that right, Ida?
Yeah.
Semi-annual basis, so that we can be looking at numbers that are basically real time.
So I think thank you, Harlan. I think what's providing a little bit of greater clarity is DSA seeing this issue come up more frequently when projects are submitted. And so when design professionals have been pursuing, or clients have been pursuing the cost estimating option, demonstrating the construction cost to determine to say it's under 50%, we receive anything that's a 3-page document to a 50-page document, right? And that's very difficult for DSA to synthesize equitably. And so our goal in creating a cost estimating template, when we get those 3-page documents or the 50-page documents, we have to filter through as to, did they include something they shouldn't have included, which then raises the cost when they could actually fall under, or did they omit something that should have been included and it wasn't, right? And then including it would bring the cost over. So we figured if we level the playing field by having a simplified template that has backup information in it if we need to dig deeper, but what's submitted is provided to DSA on a consistent basis at every office, we can then begin to compare apples to apples in terms of cost. Right. Our construction cost estimator, historically, when we've questioned cost estimates, we've relied on the districts to provide another one. We understand that's additional time and additional cost on the district. Mm-hmm. And so our goal with not only having a consultant on board to establish the templates is also to have that consultant on board when we have a question to provide an impartial judgment of saying, yeah, that's a valid cost, don't worry about it, or no, there's questions there, we need to dig further, we need to ask for information. So now we have a contracted resource ourselves to provide that feedback instead of just kicking it out back to the client, which could lead to delays. So this is only one part of the process in improving this regulation. The templates have been developed and we have assigned them to a few of the individuals on the existing buildings task force who are also on the PSCC and are testing some of those templates because they've been involved in the process of the discussions, and we're getting feedback on that right now before we start to release it to a larger audience, including information on how to use those templates. I hope that provided that clarity. Thank you.
It does, but just one question. So With the template, is the responsibility to fill out and enter the template that falls to the client, the school district, and design professionals, so to speak?
Yes.
Yes.
And that's often probably done well in advance of actual construction starting, right? Okay.
Correct. However, those costs are revisited again at when construction starts and again at close of construction, because the regulation does require that it's hitting that construction cost 50% threshold, and we do want to make sure that it's effectuated so it's not evaded. I will say that there's always the guidance to estimate at about 40%, so that through the course of construction, you're not going to hit that 50%, but it is evaluated at 3 different stages. If that's the method that's advanced to demonstrate compliance with the regulation.
And one final, and this will be it. Do you know if that construction cost consultant takes into consideration the California Construction Cost Index?
Yes.
Is that part of
Yes.
it also? Okay.
Yes.
good.
Yes.
All right.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And obviously, this is a 3-year contract. I think it's 3 years. That's probably the
Mhm.
maximum we can use. And so in evaluating this process, also our engagement, it's likely that in 3 years we'll renew a contract, but we would go out for a bid, obviously. And in that process, we would evaluate the next contractor that would fulfill that role.
Got it.
Uh,
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil, you have a question or you want to address the group?
Yeah, I just wanted to share with the group real quick some legislative outcomes, specifically AB 1572. That's a prohibition of potable water irrigating non-functional turf. I know a lot of districts are already partnering with their local water purveyors on turf rebates and turf repurposing. This is basically non-functional turf that would not be obviously play fields or recreation or lend itself to gathering spaces on campus. Recycled water obviously would be exempt. AB 1572 for the purposes of school grounds is going to be instituted in 2027. So we've been in active dialogue with the author on not only on this bill, but another bill that was going to actually mandate up to 75% native plants be used on all public and institutional projects. So there's some hurdles, I think, for local school district facilities, but again, it's helping be offset by CAL FIRE. Another one that didn't quite make it across the finish line was AB 57. This is a pocket forest initiative. Again, trying to get DGS and school grounds to provide more area for schoolyard forestry. That is also a grant under CAL FIRE and the Department of Ed. I think just broadly, I know a lot of this the campus greening and carbon offset policies aren't really going to go away, but Ida, what's DSA kind of been, is there any positions to help school districts facilitate these projects?
Yeah, so obviously engagement with us. I know that you mentioned 1572 and being in effect for schools in 2027. So I'll need to look further into the details of that. But generally, rehabilitated areas, in landscapes, if they are removing landscapes and installing landscapes, we just want to be sure that if there's any pavement areas that come in, that obviously they're accessible and provide in the accessible fabric. So there is a role for us. I think recall just to have right now individuals refer to IRA 22, which clarifies which projects must come to DSA for review and which don't. But in the sense of campus greening in general, we like to push trees, cool the environment a lot more than any turf or any shrubs. So advocating for trees here and really good management of trees. I know that they have issues with maintenance, but regionally appropriate trees will really contribute to lower, if they're placed appropriately, contribute to lower energy costs, really cool down a campus, contribute to having your students be on campus instead of ill when it's really hot due to those conditions, which preserves your daily attendance funding. So
and
it's
that's,
just,
I
I'm
guess,
just
it would be
advocate.
responsive to the extreme, what is it, the Extreme Heat Act that they passed last year.
Exactly. So I think it's just important to really look beyond the physical part of doing a lot of these efforts and the benefits that actually contribute to the environment, to faculty, to students.
I'm sorry, Eric's not with us, but is there any study group on code to talking specifically on shade trees and canopy cover, increasing that shade cover from 20% to 30%? Is there any move afoot on that end?
Yeah, so where we are right now on Cal Green, we just met recently and trying to determine where we're going with Cal Green in the next code cycle, which will be for 2025 with requirements in effect January 1st, 2026. So that these requirements on AB 1572, again, I haven't delved in deeply, but we will look at that to see if there's a nexus on specific requirements that may have been addressed in that bill. It's right now, a lot of the shade trees, when we advanced the shade tree requirements in I want to say it was 2016 code, it was a challenged concept. And I think now we're feeling greater the effects of climate change. And so to determine whether or not we need to increase, we will be looking at it. But it's in context of a lot of efforts that we're looking for. We don't know yet what we're advancing in Cal Green this code cycle. We just had one meeting, but whatever we do want to obviously engage our partners early, which is all of you, and providing feedback. Phil, if you have a recommendation, I would recommend that you send it to both Eric and I on those elements, because that's how we get a lot of our feedback, is actual real world experience. So yes, thank you. Okay, we're at 11:59. Thank you all. I will give one last opportunity. I didn't see an additional hand, but I just then will proceed with my closing comments. I hope you all found this meeting beneficial. Again, we hope to have these more often, but we really like to come to you when there's an issue. I will invite you that if there's an issue that you want to discuss with the group, please alert myself and also Andrew Smothers, who heads this communication with all of you, and we can convene a meeting by sending out a doodle poll to discuss something more in depth. We will follow up on the project inspector information that was very valuable today. We will also follow up on back check with your comments. So thank you for that. We will bring that and discuss that with our regional managers. Other than that, I really thank you all for your time. This is an important process for us here at DSA, and we thank you. And on to next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks, Ida. Good to see everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good week.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.